day to all my favorite Crocaholic listeners. This is Kenneth the K-Rock Klein, host of Krocking, Locking, and Dropping. And folks, I cannot believe we have our 15th episode. That's right, just like Grandpa Lou, I walked in 15 miles through the snow. Well, I didn't necessarily walk 15 miles through the snow, but this is the 15th episode of Krocking, Locking, and Dropping. And folks, boy, oh boy, it is really crazy how when I started this podcast that I did not think I was going to get to 15, but I am very glad that I have reached this point. And folks, we got a little good show for you going on right now. Today, we're going to be talking about possibly the biggest snub in the history of the United States basketball team, men and women. That's right. We're going to be talking about Caitlin Clark. Did she deserve to be on the U.S. women's basketball team for the upcoming Olympic Games in Paris? So that is a conversation that we're going to be getting ourselves into. And, well, it's already been 2 games in the NBA Finals, but as of right now, the Boston Celtics are currently in control for the NBA Finals, leading the Dallas Mavericks 2-0. Is the series over? Do the Mavericks have what it takes to come back? Is Boston going to take care of business down in Dallas? We'll get into all that discussion as well. So that's definitely something that I'm looking forward to discussing as well. But first and foremost, folks, I got to tell you about a pretty cool thing that happened over the weekend in my life. So I'm the oldest of 3 kids in our family. And as hard as it is for me to say this, I'm currently the only one in my family that's single right now. My younger brother, Andrew, he's got a girlfriend. He actually started dating this girl, I want to say about a couple months ago, perhaps. I mean, I could be wrong, but she was in town visiting my folks, not here in Boma, but in a different city. She was in town visiting my folks. I went down there to meet her, and she's a really nice, she seems really nice, and hopefully she continues to treat my brother well. And, you know, it's still early in their relationship, so I'm not really judging based on that, but we'll see how that relationship pans out. But then you have that, and then you have my sister, who has been dating this guy for, oh gosh, coming in on a year, I guess. That's pretty crazy. So yeah, you know, I just went down there, visited my family, and everything kind of went well. I was a little bit nervous because, you know, like I said, I'm the oldest of 3. And, you know, when you grow up as someone, you know, like as the oldest person, there's a tendency for you to feel pride to be the oldest. Like you are proud to be the oldest. And in my case, it's almost as if luck kind of has it to where I'm usually the oldest in almost everything. You know, in my family of 3, I'm the oldest of the kids. I'm the oldest person in my Sunday school class. I was the oldest person in my high school and college grads. I was among the oldest people in my high school and college grads. So I kind of took pride in being the oldest person. And sometimes you usually think, well, if you're the oldest person, it's really simple. You know, you're the first one to drive. You're the first one to graduate from high school and go on to college, you know. You'll be the first one to get a job, you'll be the first one to get married, and you'll be the first one to have kids, and you'll be the first one to live happily ever after, yada, yada, yada. But, you know, they always say life's not a race, and I have come to that conclusion as of now, but it's kind of been difficult for me because, you know, right now I'm 33 years old, and I am still single. Like, I haven't had a date in my life. You know, I haven't had a serious girlfriend. I mean, I've been on a couple of, I don't want to call them dates. Like, I've had some times where I hung out with some girls and, you know, just, you know, for coffee or dinner or just nothing too romantic or fancy, but, you know, so but it is kind of a little hard, and it's kind of a little tough when you see your younger siblings, you know, dating and you're not. And I was a little bit hesitant to go down to visit my folks this weekend with all my family members because, you know, my brother was bringing his girlfriend home, and this was the first time I was going to meet her, and I was a little bit worried, not because I was jealous, but because I just felt like, you know, I'm older than they are, and it's kind of tough, and I don't want to feel like I'm interrupting anything as far as them hanging out together. So Saturday night, they invited me out to I guess you would call it just like a certain bar or it's like a restaurant or a bar downtown, and I went down there and I had a really good time. I got to talk to them, and they seemed to be, it was really nice. Even though they're all kind of younger than I am, it was a real good experience, and just kind of one of those things where it's almost like, look, you should be happy for your siblings. They're dating, and you haven't really found that person yet, and when it's your time, it's your time. But for right now, you're just gonna have to learn to be happy with them, and that was one of the experiences that I've had trying to figure out everything in how to handle the relationships I've had, with my siblings. So, but ultimately, it was a really great weekend, and hoping that my brother and his new girlfriend continue to date for a while. And, I'm not going to assume anything at this point, because we don't know how these relationships will pan out, whether they found the right person or not. But I do want to express my happiness, and I continue to wish them well. Hope they continue seeing each other, and I hope to continue to see their partners, I guess you call them now, since, well, we haven't really reached that stage. And I'm not going to judge. We're just going to continue going with that flow as of this moment. But speaking of going with the flow, we are going to be right back, and we're going to be discussing Caitlin Clark and her snub from the U.S. Olympic women's basketball team. Was it the right choice? Was it the wrong choice? We'll find out when we come back. So, with the exception of the last episode, I had been doing a lot of talking about Caitlin Clark, and I'm not trying to call myself a Caitlin Clark homer here, but I do feel that the last times I've been on the podcast, there's always been something with Caitlin Clark, whether it's with her struggles in the WNBA, or in the last particular case, she had this hard foul that had been, given to her by Kennedy Carter, and that was kind of one of the cheap shots in my mind, which, was it really necessary? I didn't think it was, but, Clark has really handled herself in a very professional way. She hasn't really complained as much. I mean, yeah, she might have wanted some fouls called on players, but with regards to all the stuff that's been said, all the criticisms from everybody and such, Caitlin Clark has really handled herself in a very positive way. She hasn't really been open and boisterous, hasn't had that swagger. She's just kind of getting adjusted to the WNBA. So, 2024, as we all know, is an Olympic year. Paris, France will be hosting the Olympic Games. And there's been a lot of excitement because on the basketball level, the Americans have decided to put together a team to go and try to win the Olympic Games. This came after an embarrassing, humiliating loss at the World Championships a couple of years ago, where basically the Americans decided to put in all of their, anybody that was willing to play, whether it be reserve players, role players, guys that weren't stars and such, and they had a bad result in the World Championships. I don't think they actually medaled in that, now that I think about it. But they didn't win gold. So this obviously has led the NBA players like LeBron James, Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, and, or maybe not Kevin Durant, but guys that are willing to come out for Team USA on the men's basketball side. Now, as far as the women's basketball team is concerned, they're having the same, they're trying to figure out their situation, as far as, who's going to be on the team, or actually they have their roster selected as far as who's going to be playing for them in 2024's Olympic Games in Paris, France. And there is one name that you probably have noticed that is missing from that squad. I'm talking about Caitlin Clark. Now, you might say to yourself, okay, hold on just a second here. Caitlin Clark on the U.S. Olympic basketball team, does he really deserve to be on the squad? I mean, let's be realistic here. I mean, she hasn't really been the best women's basketball player to this point. She's a rookie. She hasn't really made some adjustments. She hasn't really stood out And why would you want to put Caitlin Clark on a women's basketball team when you have players like Brittany Griner, Sabrina Ionescu, or I apologize if I mispronounced her name, Kelsey Plum, Breanna Stewart, Diana Taurasi, legends and young players, people that have been in the WNBA, and they're trying to field their best women's basketball team up to this point. Why would you want someone like Caitlin Clark, who has only appeared in a few games in women's basketball, why would you want her to be on the team? I mean, just be realistic here. There are probably players that are more deserving than her to be on this women's basketball team. Isn't that right? I mean, after all, I think they definitely picked the right squad. Well, there's definitely a lot of people that are very upset that Caitlin Clark isn't on the team, and trying to pull out a few comments from some of these analysts here. And one comment that, came out was from Greg Anthony, who's a former NBA player. He says in a tweet, "Congrats to all who made the team, but I gotta say, how you don't include CC, that's Caitlin Clark, how you don't include her for the growth of the game is mind-boggling. You have a great product and people are excited about it. Build on it." So he's not too pleased with Caitlin Clark not being on the U.S. Olympic women's basketball team. And it's kind of a bit of a fair argument because Caitlin Clark right now is the most talked about player in all the WNBA. Not Diana Taurasi, not Breanna Stewart, not Brittany Griner, not Kelsey Plum. These, like Caitlin Clark, who has only been a rookie. And for whatever reason, she was not selected as a women's basketball member of the women's basketball team. Now, is that necessarily the WNBA kicking her out or not putting her on because of some jealousy or envy, as we like to talk about? I don't think it is. I think the WNBA certainly wants to put in the best players with the best chance, and Caitlin Clark, she hasn't really earned her stripes yet, but they're probably saying, well, okay, Caitlin Clark, she's going to be a really great WNBA player, but we don't want to take a chance on her because she might not be much of a beneficial benefit to this team in as far as competitiveness. When you have all these other players that are more competitive, that have had some experience and have an opportunity to win the gold medal for Team USA, which is something that they should be doing as of this moment. But it was a 6-member panel who made the selection as far as who was going to be on the U.S. Olympic basketball team, and Caitlin Clark was not selected on the roster. However, and you're saying to yourself, well, if you think that Caitlin Clark isn't deserving of the spot, you might think, well, the reason why she shouldn't be is because she's a rookie. No rookie has ever been on the WNBA or U.S. Olympic team. Okay, let's see here. We have Diana Taurasi, who was on the team back in 2004. We had Candace Parker, who was on the team in 2008. Breanna Stewart, 2016. Oh, and by the way, have you ever heard of some women's basketball players who actually didn't play professionally, or they played professionally but in other leagues? They were on this team before the WNBA was formed. And who was on that 96 Olympic squad? Rebecca Lobo. She graduated from UConn back in 1995. She had yet to play a WNBA game, and yet she was selected for that team. And that team won the gold medal. So, what exactly is the issue here? Like, why is it that Caitlin Clark is not selected to be on the squad? I think it's absolutely ridiculous that Caitlin Clark was left off the team. Now, let me say this. I know that if she were on the team, she would not have been used as the best player. She might have gotten more attention than anybody else. But isn't that what the WNBA, what women's basketball wants? They want attention? I mean, you have an opportunity to get yourself up to par with what the NBA's been doing or what the NFL has been doing. You have a player, you have a product, you have somebody that is generating a lot of publicity, that has a lot of fans supporting her. Yes, her team may not be doing so well. Yes, she's had her up and down moments, but you expect that. And yet, here she is. She is generating a following that has never been seen before and probably never been seen since. And yet, you keep her off the team? I mean, You're trying to grow the women's basketball game, not just in the United States, but around the world. And how do you do that? You bring in the best players. And yet, with all due respect to the Brittany Griners, the Diana Taurasi's, Breanna Stewart's, Kelsey Plums, and all that, none of these girls have really brought in the attention that Caitlin Clark has brought in, especially in the WNBA. And it's not necessarily to say that they're not bad players. They are great players. They're the best in the WNBA, but they haven't had this following. And yet here you have a player of Caitlin Clark's caliber that has an opportunity to help develop into being one of the best stories, in all of women's basketball, let alone all of women's sports. And we're talking about the Olympic Games here. We're talking about going to Paris, France. How many people around the world don't follow women's basketball? They don't follow, I'm not sure about the statistics and numbers, but I'm going to guess they don't follow women's basketball as much as they follow men's basketball. Because we're seeing, they probably know who LeBron James is. They probably know who Steph Curry is, or, Kevin Durant, and maybe Anthony Davis, or just some guys on the squad. How in the world are you missing out on an opportunity? Are you trying to say, well, we're only here to win gold medals, and yet you're probably not going to have as much people follow women's basketball unless Caitlin Clark was on that team. Now, here's the thing that's been going on with Caitlin Clark. She has had to make some adjustments. She's been the target. She's been the person that a lot of people, well, at least in women's basketball, there's this public perception, and I know that it's not necessarily entirely true, but there is some perception that there's some jealousy and envy going on with some WNBA players. They're a little bit jealous of how much Caitlin Clark has not been able, or is getting all this following when they've been trying so hard for the past decade to earn, get the fans to follow them, and they haven't been able to succeed. And you sit there and you wonder, why in the world is this happening now? But it's just because of Caitlin Clark's story. She's comes from humble beginnings. She took a previously not so powerhouse women's basketball team to the brink of the national championships 2 years in a row. She's the all-time leading scorer in college basketball history, men or women. And yet, she's not getting treated, or she's kind of getting a little disrespected in a way. I personally think it was a bad choice by Team USA to leave Caitlin Clark off the basketball court. And I know people are going to say, well, if you put her on the team, you're taking her away from a spot from somebody that was more deserving of it, and that person might not get an opportunity to compete again. And yeah, you may be right. But here's the problem. We're talking about growing the game here. We're talking about growing women's basketball to a whole new level. Not just from the WNBA or women's college basketball, but to the entire world. Because a lot of women are to be more empowering. They're trying to step up and show the world that they can be just as great as the men can be in terms of generating a lot of revenue and such. And they have got a long way to go. But I feel like this was a perfect step for them to get Caitlin Clark to be the women's basketball team. And you know something else? If you want Caitlin Clark to show you what she's all about, you put her on the team, but you also get her to deal with the veterans, to make her show what it's really like in the WNBA when you're playing against the best players. Make Caitlin Clark fight, or not necessarily fight, but play hard against the veterans in practice sessions and such. Because I'll tell you this, when the Dream Team of 1992 was orchestrated, when they first brought in NBA players, they had 12 spots, 11 players were NBA. They only saved one spot for a college player. And it could have been Shaquille O'Neal, but Christian Laettner, who in my mind was a better college player than Shaq was in that stretch, was deserving of the spot. The reason why Christian Laettner was deserving of that spot, he has openly said that he was okay with going from being the star player of Duke University after winning back-to-back national championships while playing for Coach K. He was okay with going from being the star player to being the last guy to come off the bench, to being hazed, to being picked on by these professional players, because he understood that he was going to have to earn their respect. And he did that. He wasn't the best player on the Dream Team. He did have his moments, not saying he was anything spectacular, when you're overshadowed by Michael Jordan, Charles Barkley, Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, Clyde Drexler, and so on and so forth, even Scottie Pippen, you're going to have a tendency to accept the fact that you're just not, you're not the star. And Leitner knew that. He knew he wasn't going to be the star. Aside, he was definitely a guy that was enjoying the ride, and he definitely played well when he got in, even though it wasn't much. But ultimately, he got his gold medal, and he earned the respect of the NBA. In fact, he's in the Hall of Fame, not as a player, but as part of the Dream Team who was earned to the Hall of Fame as a squad. And I personally think Christian Laettner needs to be in the Hall of Fame, not for his NBA career, but for his college career. It's the basketball Hall of Fame, people. It's not the professional NBA Hall of Fame or the college basketball Hall of Fame. It's just basketball in general. So I think you definitely need to put him in the Hall of Fame right there. But it's not just Laettner who was selected to play before he got a chance to play in the NBA. It was Anthony Davis in 2012. He had just come off a national championship with Kentucky on John Calipari. He got drafted in the NBA, and before he got a chance to suit up for the New Orleans Pelicans, he goes to London, and he wins a gold medal with LeBron James and Dwayne Wade and all these great players on that 2002 squad. So, yeah, it is possible for somebody of a young talent to play in the Olympics before they get a chance to play in the NBA. Now, Caitlin Clark, obviously, she hasn't really been angry, but she did tell her coach, and this was reported before a game, she said being snubbed actually woke up a monster inside her. And she goes on to have this outstanding game. And it's kind of ironic that she said that, because it almost makes me think of Isaiah Thomas. Going back to the 92 Dream Team again, Isaiah Thomas was left off the team because of some personal bad feelings with him and Michael Jordan and some of the other players, because he was the leader of the bad boy Detroit Pistons, who were known for being a little rough around the edges when they won their 2 NBA championships. Team USA decided to select John Stockton instead. Well, what happens when those 2 players met up with each other? Isaiah torches Stockton for like 44 points or so, and yeah, he got a little bit disappointed. Of course, he would win a gold medal with USA team in 94, although he was injured at the World Cup Championships or something like that. So, yeah, I feel like this was a big missed opportunity for Team USA Women's Basketball to win the gold, or to have Caitlin Clark to have a chance to grow the game. And I think it's going to leave a lot of fans disappointed. Now, certainly, if there is an injury, I think maybe you should consider having Caitlin Clark join the team. Now, I will say, though, that people are going to point out that, well, Caitlin Clark didn't try out at the U.S. Olympics stuff, or the U.S. tryouts, because she was in the middle of the Final Four with Iowa. Look, if Iowa had been eliminated, I'm sure she would have tried out for the USA team. But you can't help the fact that Iowa was having this incredible season all the way to the national championship. But that it is what it is. Caitlin Clark has been snubbed, and I don't necessarily agree with it. I think Team USA made a mistake, but you know what? Sometimes you have these snubs, and ultimately they go on to do pretty well in these tournaments. So I think Team USA will win the gold medal again, but I'm just going to have a hard time believing that they're going to generate as much publicity as they would if Caitlin Clark were on that squad. So just my takes in general, I think it was a big mistake. Team USA should have had Caitlin Clark on their squad, but hopefully Clark will be able to get an opportunity, because in 2028, I want to say the Olympic Games are back here in the United States, in Los Angeles, and if that's the case, then really Clark should be a candidate to make that squad, and that should definitely generate a lot of buzz. And speaking of generating a lot of buzz, we'll be right back. We're going to be talking about the NBA Finals to this point. Is the series over? Is Boston completely in control? Can Dallas come back? We'll find out when we come back. we get into the NBA Finals segment where we talk about things that have been of note through the first two games of the series, there was some breaking news that happened earlier today as of this podcast. Much attention was on Dan Hurley, the head coach of the University of Connecticut, who had just come off their second straight national championship. There was a lot of interest as far as whether or not Dan Hurley was going to remain the head coach of UConn or whether he was going to go to the Los Angeles Lakers, as the Lakers are in need of a new head coach. And, well, after so much keen interest, although it really wasn't a week's worth of, drama, because the Lakers at one point were interested in hiring J.J. Redick, a former podcaster, but then they shifted their attention to Dan Hurley, and they gave him a pretty good offer. I mean, it was like 6 or 7 years, $70 million. I mean, it was a pretty good offer. I did offer up my points as to why I think that although Dan Hurley shouldn't take the job, it's a better hire for the Lakers than hiring J.J. Redick, who is a podcaster, former NBA player, to take over the team. Well, as of this podcast, Dan Hurley made it official that he would not accept the Lakers job, and he will be returning to Storrs, Connecticut, in a chance to lead his UConn Huskies to a historic third straight national championship. And I think that's the right move, because obviously you want to have a chance for history and all that. And I think Dan Hurley will be a guy that could be of interest to coach the NBA one of these days, but I just don't think it was the right move for him to go to Los Angeles. Because the Lakers are kind of in a bit of a dysfunction, and he would have had to deal with LeBron James. And the question is there anyone that can be able to coach LeBron James, or else you should have just made LeBron James a player coach? But I don't think that's likely to happen at this point. I just think it's absolutely insane for Dan Hurley to go there. So Dan Hurley remaining at UConn, LeBron James and the Lakers now having to wonder who their new head coach is going to be, and we'll keep an eye on that as time goes on. But anyways, folks, it's now time we talk about the NBA Finals. And I got to say that I'm a little bit surprised. I'm very surprised. I said a little bit surprised, but I'm kind of very surprised because I really thought that the first two games would be evenly matched, despite the fact that Dallas and Boston were different seeds, Boston at 1, Dallas at 5. I really thought that this would be a pretty evenly matched series, but through the first two games, that has not been the case. The Boston Celtics currently have a 2-0 series lead over the Dallas Mavericks. They have shellacked the Mavericks in the first two games, although Game 2 was kind of a close game, 105-98 in favor of the Celtics, but Game 1, an 18-point victory by Boston. And, right now it's kind of becoming clear that we're starting to see that the Celtics are clearly the better team, despite the fact that there have been some chemistry issues with Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown for most of the part. But to this point, the Boston Celtics are clearly showing why they are tremendously the better team. And it isn't just because of the tandem of Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, it's because of the depth. You think about Game 2, the real star of that game was Drew Holiday, who came off the bench or was a key role player. He scored 26 points in that game. The guy was just simply red hot. I mean, he goes 11 of 14 from the field, grabs 11 rebounds, and then dishes out 3 assists. But the key stat is from Jason Tatum, who did not have a great Game 2. In fact, he hasn't really been having the best series for the Boston Celtics. He's only shooting 31.6% from the field. He finished with 18 points on 6 of 22 in Game 2 and was unfortunately unable to hit at least 6 of his 7 3-point attempts. But the key stat from Jason Tatum was that he recorded 12 assists. So he's becoming a bit more of a ball distributor, even though his shots haven't quite fallen in up to this point. And I think that's really key for a team that wins a championship. If you're going to win a championship, you're going to have the depth of guys that can step up if your star player isn't having the best series, or at least if one of your star players isn't having the series to this point and hopefully can turn things around. But if you have the guys that can step up and contribute, you're going to find a way to win. And that's exactly what's happening to this point. Boston has been really using their key contributions so well. In fact, Drew Holiday had a great game too. Kristaps Porzingis. Now, here was a situation that I said going into this series that he was going to be the X factor. And Kristaps Porzingis in game 2 only had 12 points and 23 rebounds. But this guy, has really been a big force. 20 points in game 1 on 8 of 13 shooting and 6 rebounds. And he has really been their X factor. And I said that if he was able to play in a lineup, because he had been out with a calf injury for a while, if he was able to play in their lineup, then for sure he would be a key factor in the reason why Boston would go on to win a championship through 2 games. Now, having said that, he did suffer a bit of an injury scare after Game 2, so his status for Game 3 is up in the air. If he's unable to go in Game 3, then you hope that he only misses that one game if you're a Celtics fan, because now you have an opportunity to really take a game from Dallas on their home court. And if he's not back in by that series, that could be a problem as far as I'm concerned. But Porzingis is definitely a guy you don't want to have out there. Of course, you do have other key players. Jaylen Brown continuing to have his way in this postseason up to this point. And so, at the end of the day, it's really about having the depth of the team. If you have one or two of your star players not performing well, then you're going to have other guys step up. That's kind of also been the case with the Dallas Mavericks, although theirs is in a bit of a different situation. And one thing we talked about, or that was brought about from this NBA Finals, has been Kyrie Irving and his situation against the Boston Celtics. Kyrie Irving came into the series having lost 10 straight games to Boston ever since, an incident where he stomped on the lucky Irish court. Now, whether or not you want to call that superstition, you want to call that a curse, or you want to call that just an unfortunate slump, you have what you have. But here's the thing. Luka and Kyrie Irving have been the key catalysts for the Dallas Mavericks. If those two guys get going, they're hard to stop. But one thing that Luka Doncic has had over the past few years before Kyrie came along, he's had to be the carrier. He's had to be the ball scorer, the guy that can, lead your team, the one that can put up the most points and carry the squad all the way as far as he can go. And for most of that time, everyone recognized that Luka can't do that by himself. He needs to have a second scorer. He tried that with Kristaps Porzingis. That didn't work. With Christian Wood, that hasn't quite worked out to plan. But now you're bringing Kyrie Irving, and that seems to be a great partnership, and everything has been going tremendously well for the Mavericks until they got to the NBA Finals. And as of right now, Luka Doncic is averaging 31 points per game, which is to be expected because he could be, he's really their go-to guy. And if you can stop him, then, you have a legitimate chance. But, of course, that depends on if Kyrie Irving is stepping up well. And to this point, Kyrie Irving has not lived up to his hype. 14 points per game, 2.5 rebounds, 4.0 assists on just 35% field goal shooting. So clearly, the issue isn't with Luka. The issue is that Kyrie Irving is not stepping up to this point. And you have to think that that is a major concern for the Dallas Mavericks. If they want to win this championship series, both of these guys have to step up, clearly. But here's another problem with Dallas. They are arguably the best team when it comes to shooting corner three-pointers. And they did so in the regular season. But they only hit 1 of 5 on Sunday's Game 2. And they're trying, with Boston's defense, they're forcing Luka Doncic and Kyrie to go, hit towards mid-range jump shots. And they're playing to Boston's advantage at this point. Because one thing about this Boston team, they are doing such a great job at trying to find some weaknesses, looking for opportunities to get some mismatches there, and then forcing your opponents to making some, ridiculous, impossible decisions because of the way they space out on the defensive side. One of the key moments in Game 2 was when the Boston Celtics decided to have Al Horford, who has yet to win a championship despite playing more playoff games than anybody in the history of the NBA, without a championship. And they decided to have him go over to trap Luka Doncic, which Boston did not do in Game 1. And that strategy paid off well in Game 2. Even though the Celtics ended up winning the game by 7 points because they were unable to capitalize on some key shots, the truth of the series is that someone other than Luka Doncic has to step up for Dallas. And right now, Luka's Robin and Kyrie Irving is not doing his job. Clearly, Luka Doncic is the best player in these NBA Finals up to this point. 30 points in Game 1, 32 in Game 2. Now, if the Celtics were to push the series to maybe 6 games or 7, you can argue that if Luka continues to play well, he should be the Finals MVP regardless of the result. But that's the thing. You know, this series coming in, it was Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving as possibly, like if you were to make a top 10 list of players in the NBA Finals, you could arguably say that Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving occupy 2 of the top 10 spots. Maybe 3 of the top 10 spots. Because clearly the Celtics come into this as the better team, going 64-18, which isn't the best record in Celtics history, but certainly puts them on tier as being one of the best teams in Celtics history, if not recent NBA history as well. The thing is, it's about the supporting cast. There is no question that Boston's supporting cast is doing a much better job on Dallas' supporting cast. Jason Tatum, he had 18 points on 22 shots after going 16 points on 16 shots in the first game. I mean, Jaylen Brown in Game 1, 22 points. And as I said, Porzingis, 20 in Game 1. Drew Holiday coming off in Game 2, going 11 of 14 with 26. And Brown, of course, with 21. While Derek White, and there's a guy that we haven't talked about, he had 18 points. Like, when you have 4 guys for one team that is so dominant, when you have 4 guys going double figures and they're getting close to 20 points, chances are you're not going to win. You are clearly not going to win. And that is something that if the Mavericks want to come back and win this series, they have to find a way to overcome their early struggles, get Kyrie going, and limit these Celtics supporting casts. Let one guy try to beat you, because clearly Boston is doing it with the team at this point. So with all this in effect, this brings us to this question. Is the series over? Well, of course the series is not over, because the Dallas Mavericks have yet to turn things up, and they are too good of a team to be swept in 4 straight games. But they do have a lot of things to figure out. They do need to overcome their early struggles. And the good news for them is they're going home. They're playing so well at home, even though they had a better road record this season. But unfortunately, this also plays into Boston's hands, because the Celtics to this point have yet to lose a road game. Now, there have been 36 times in NBA Finals history that a team has gone up 2-0 in the series. And only 5 times has the team that trailed 2-0 in a series come back to win the championship. Last time it happened was in 2021, a couple years ago. The Milwaukee Bucks trailed 2-0 to the Phoenix Suns. They ended up winning 4 straight to take the series. Giannis Antetokounmpo, 35.2 points, was named the Finals MVP. Then you got to go back 5 years earlier than that. 2016, the first and to this point only time that a team overcame a 3-1 deficit in the NBA Finals, that being the Cleveland Cavaliers against the Golden State Warriors. Probably the last time that LeBron James was considered a hero to an extent. The Miami Heat in 2006, they did it against the Dallas Mavericks. So if there's a lesson that the Mavericks could learn, it's that they were ahead 2-0 in that series, and then they allowed Miami to win 4 straight. So they can be on the opposite end of this situation, if you really think about it. Then you go back to Portland in 1977. The late Bill Walton and the Trailblazers trailed the 76ers 2-0, and then they were able to rally from 2-0 back to win that series in 6 games. They won the last 4 times. And then the first time that it happened, go all the way back to 1969 when the Boston Celtics defeated the Los Angeles Lakers. It was Bill Russell's last season and it was Wilt Chamberlain's first season with the Lakers. The Celtics trailed 2-0. They battled back, forced a deciding Game 7 in LA, and that was where the Celtics ended up winning that championship. So, clearly it is possible, but history says that the Mavericks are in trouble. And I don't think the Mavericks, this series is not over. I think Dallas will win Game 3 because you're playing in front of your home fans. You have an opportunity to turn things around, and you can at least say that you're back in the series. But it all depends if you got your guys starting well. I think if Dallas loses this game, this series is over. But I also think that Dallas will more than likely need to win their next game in Dallas to, have a chance. And I think it's going to require them to win at least one game in Boston and all 3 games in Dallas. They cannot afford to lose a game. But they're having to do it against a Boston team that is yet to lose in the postseason. Now, will the Celtics lose one game in Dallas? I think they will. But at this rate, it does seem like the Mavericks have some issues that they need to work out. They need to find a way to let the pressure off of, being behind 0-2. Yes, Luka Doncic is having a great series, but you're going to need other guys to step up. Kyrie needs to wake up. Derek Lively II needs to step up big for the Dallas Mavericks. Because right now, you are halfway to seeing your dream season come to a screeching halt and come crashing down. And, there was somebody that said that Dallas was Titletown USA. Okay, so the Rangers win a World Series, but the Dallas Stars didn't make the Stanley Cup Finals. And Dallas Mavericks, if you lose, then I'm sorry, you are not Titletown USA. That's just not the case. So, whatever happens, happens. But the Mavericks, if they want to come back and win this series, they need to step up. They need to figure out a way to limit the supporting cast of the Boston Celtics, because that's the reason why Boston is winning at this point. It's not because of the play of Jaylen Brown. It's because Boston's supporting cast is stepping up tremendously well. So, for that reason, I think Boston is in a good spot to this point, but I do think if they lose Game 3, they will need to find a way to bounce back to get themselves a victory in Game 4 and then potentially end the series in 5. But I still think this series will go a little longer than that. It might be a 6-game series at this rate, but we'll have to wait and see. But as of right now, if you're a Celtics fan, you should be feeling pretty good, but a little bit cautious because you don't want to fall victim to a Dallas comeback at this point. The Mavericks are just too good a team to bounce or to let slide or let loose if you feel confident that you already got this in the bag. So those are my thoughts currently on the situation in the NBA Finals. At this point, this week will be a telltale sign of whether the series comes to an end or whether Dallas can actually make this a series. So, with all that in mind, that is going to wrap things up here for my latest edition of Krocking, Locking, and Dropping. Thank you very much for tuning in once again. You can listen to my podcast on Spotify and also on my YouTube channel at KWCLINE91. So, Krocking, Locking, and Dropping, episode 15 with the K-Rock. This is Kenneth the K-Rock Klein. Hope you guys have yourself a great day.